All right, all set, Andrew.
Wonderful, thank you. Welcome to the second official event of New Hampshire Energy Week. My name is Andrew Provencher. I'm a principal at BFresh Consulting, and here today in my capacity with the Nature Conservancy. New Hampshire Energy Week is brought to you by our generous sponsors, which include Natixis Investment Managers, Coca-Cola Northeast, and NH Saves. If you missed our kickoff event yesterday, you can watch it online at our website, nhenergyfuture.org, and a recording of this event will be available online later. Today's event is titled Energy Opportunities in the Granite State, and we're looking forward to a great conversation with our group of panelists. The format will be that of a moderated panel discussion, followed by a short question and answer if time permits. Moderating the discussion today will be Mr. Mark Beaudoin, who is a partner at Nixon Peabody. Mr. Beaudoin represents developers, landowners, and investors in all aspects of commercial real estate transactions, including land use and environmental permitting. We're very fortunate to have him lead our discussion here today. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Andrew. I really appreciate it. I'm honored to moderate this panel today, and it's called Energy Opportunities in the Granite State. Just to set forth the agenda for the hour we have, I wanted to let everyone know how we thought this should go. So I'll introduce each of the panelists, and they'll have 5 minutes or so to introduce themselves and give some opening thoughts. Then we'll have a moderated panel discussion with 6 or so really great questions for the panel members. That should last around 30 minutes. And then hopefully we'll have 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A. I am told that each of the registrants should be able to type in their questions for the panel members in a chat box that you can locate on your monitor. And then Brianna will forward those to me, and I'll read them off at the end. So, to our panel. First, I want to introduce Madeleine Mineau, Executive Director of Clean Energy, New Hampshire. Next, Benjamin Byboth, Director of Grid Modernization for Eversource. And last but not least, Mike Kaplan, the President of Olivewood Energy. And I'd love to start with Ben. If you could just give us a little more insight on yourself and Eversource, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, and thanks for everyone listening today, and appreciate the opportunity to come represent Eversource. I'm really excited about working for Eversource. I joined the company about 9 months ago. Really looking forward to the opportunities and some of the unique problems that we get to solve when we think about grid modernization in the New England region. So Eversource is the largest energy provider in New England. We represent about 3.6 million customers across 3 states. We're really proud of some of our accomplishments in some of the clean energy space. We've been just recognized by Forbes as one of the most just companies, 2021 Newsweek's most responsible companies, and Barron's most sustainable companies. Specifically in my role with grid modernization, really focused on bringing new technologies to the grid to help improve and support the proliferation of clean energies across our territories. Before joining Eversource, I was with Entergy, which is a large utility in the South, where I led the innovation efforts there. And leading up to that, had done large utility scale solar operations and maintenance, and then developed a residential rooftop solar program for low income customers. So a lot of this topic is really near and dear to my heart and my career. So I'm really looking forward to the rest of the conversation with the panel today. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben, and welcome to the Northeast. How about Mike Kaplan next?
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to participate. And it's very exciting, the set of topics that you put together for the week, as well as all the opportunities in New Hampshire. Olivewood Energy is a developer of solar and storage projects. We're typically focused on projects that would connect directly to the grid, and are working largely in New Hampshire, but a bit of activity elsewhere in the Northeast. And we've really enjoyed working with communities in New Hampshire. And I think that the description of this topic is interesting in terms of integrating these resources with the grid, because there's integrating them electrically, which is something that New Hampshire has a really good opportunity for in terms of some physical characteristics, as well as some good partners to work with. But there's also integrating these projects in communities and making sure that they can be done responsibly. And that's something that may take some more time in New Hampshire because of frankly, just some of the characteristics of the physical environment, but it's something that can be done and that we've really enjoyed doing.
Great, thanks, Mike. Madeleine.
Thanks, Mark. So I'm Executive Director of Clean Energy New Hampshire, and if you don't know us yet, Clean Energy New Hampshire is a nonprofit based here in Concord, and we work statewide in New Hampshire. We do policy, education, and advocacy for renewable energy, energy efficiency, and all things clean tech. We do a lot of education and technical assistance with a lot of wonderful energy committees. We love working with energy committees. We feel like they're great local energy champions. We just try to give them the knowledge and helping hand and resources they need to make their energy vision for their town a reality. We have a North Country focused initiative. We have 2 staff members that work exclusively up there in Coos County, which we've thought is really great and helped us do some focused work there, get a lot of projects done. We also work increasingly on clean transportation by administering Drive Electric New Hampshire, so working on a lot of electric vehicle and electric vehicle infrastructure issues.
Great, thank you. Let's just jump right into it. I have a question here for Ben. Ben, you work on grid modernization and Eversource. What exactly is grid modernization?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. We've defined a vision that says to transform the distribution grid of today with the technologies of tomorrow, to provide customer-centric platform enabling the transition to clean energy future while continuously improving the safety, security, reliability, and cost effectiveness of the distribution grid, right? So obviously there's a lot to that. So we'll kind of break that up into some chunks. Transforming the grid of today with technologies of tomorrow, right? So we're obviously seeing a change in the distribution grid, and parts of our system is really at an inflection point where we've reached full saturation of the ability to host distributed energy resources, and yet we continue to see a customer demand for some more and more of these resources. We see policy objectives in some of our territories aligning to some of that opportunity, and in order to do that, that requires a lot more control, visibility of the grid, and so there's a lot of emerging technologies, not just in the hardware space, but a lot of it in the software space. We're seeing a lot more reliance on operational technologies and information technologies and the convergence of those two as we think about getting more data. And with more data, we get more granular visibility into the distribution grid. And when we have more visibility, we can do things like increasing the hosting capacity, which is near and dear to a lot of our stakeholders' hearts right now, right, across our territory. When we think about providing a customer-centric platform that enables a transition to a cleaner energy, Eversource has the most aggressive decarbonization goal of any utility in the United States, with a goal of decarbonization by 2030, which is a really aggressive goal. We take a lot of pride in our journey to that space. So on the grid modernization side of things, about making sure that it's customer-centric, we work closely with our energy efficiency partners inside of our company as we start thinking about adding distributed energy resource management to help reduce the system peaks across our territory, to reduce costs for all customers, and to help make sure that when the customer wants to choose how they want to procure their power, that they get the opportunity to participate in that space. And then the last part about continuously improving safety and security and reliability, we take a lot of pride in being the grid operator. And then from the grid modernization standpoint, supporting the operators who work to work in these more and more challenging and dynamic systems. I think if you look back for 120 years, it was all pretty much the same, power flowed in one direction. And now we're really getting complex systems where you're having loops in the distribution system, you're having more storage in there, you're having some assets controlled by the utility, some controlled by third parties that are being sent signals from our distributed energy resource management systems. Things are changing from more, how do you think the day is going to go, to what are the inter-hour weather patterns and stuff like that. So in that, making sure that our operators who have the responsibility for safe and reliable service are really well supported with the best technology, the best visibility, and the best control. All of that together and all of those enabling investments makes up what grid modernization is at Eversource. And beyond all that, it's a group of talented individuals who are really committed to this purpose and working together to try to help move all that forward.
Great. So I guess the next question is, how would you describe the status of the grid in New Hampshire? Is it ready to host more clean energy and distributed generation, or do we have improvements to do? And I think, given that you come from away, what is your view on whether or not the New Hampshire grid is similar or different than the nation as a whole?
Yeah, the New Hampshire grid is unique, right? So we have a little bit of a different transmission system than you would see in some of the places. That has to be a consideration. I think when we're looking at safe and reliable operations, taking the lessons learned in our territory, when we think about the interconnection process, we're not just thinking about how we interconnect to the system, but also how do we connect to the system when it's under a contingency or under a strain. So we call that the N+1 contingency planning. So it's about making sure that we're ready for all of what's going to be needed in the future, taking all of those lessons learned. So in the near term, to answer your question directly, yes, we are ready to support and host more clean energy in New Hampshire. And we do think we're going to be ready across the board to not just do that, but to help eventually accelerate that progress through a number of different initiatives we're working on. I think the other parts is to make sure that we're taking a holistic look at the lessons learned across our territory and seeing where those trends start to move, and when we start to near inflection points, what can we do that we've learned? And so we think that Eversource is really uniquely positioned to help in a very cost-effective manner support the transition to more and more of a distributed architecture, to more renewable architecture across the region. Additionally, I think that when we're looking at the readiness for making those investments, that the other parts of the system can't be neglected at the same time, right? So we have to be very mindful about making sure that the existing infrastructure is maintained reliable. And so we talk about what do we need to do to our substations to keep them, to future-proof them in a way that they can be more dynamic and more available to host more resources in the future. So all in all, short answer, yes, we're ready. Is there more we can continue to do? Absolutely. There's a lot of opportunities for continued investment that enables more investment in the local economy and in the green energy future.
Thanks, Ben. Mr. Kaplan, as a renewable energy developer, can you explain some opportunities for renewable energy development in New Hampshire?
Happily. So New Hampshire has quite a number of opportunities. The opportunities are across different technologies as well, and so the opportunities are also for different parties. There's the opportunities in terms of new sources of supply or increased sources of supply. There's certainly a very deliberate effort to make use of offshore wind resources. There are significant opportunities for onshore renewables, some existing projects as well as new projects. Competition has led to decreased prices and improvements in technology for solar and for storage, and we certainly see significant opportunities there. There are also significant opportunities for host communities and for New Hampshire more broadly. For host communities, these projects can be designed in ways that they can provide significant, ongoing, stable revenues to those towns. They can also have broader benefits because the reality is, based on the timing of New Hampshire's demand for power, many of these technologies, regardless of whom they contract with, are going to have the effect or have the expected effect of reducing prices in New Hampshire. So we see significant opportunities in each of those areas, and there are opportunities to kind of increase the potential for these resources too. There are a number of tools in some other states that are available that are not readily available in New Hampshire in terms of the availability of long-term contracts. So that's another potential, I'll phrase as opportunity here, but I'm very excited about what we see for the scale of opportunity in New Hampshire for both the historical projects, the newer technologies such as offshore wind, and frankly, just a different perspective on the opportunities for how large-scale solar can be developed in New Hampshire in ways that are compatible with the community as well.
Thanks, Mike. I know your company's doing a lot of work in our state, and you're in different stages of that work, and I'm wondering, you touched upon it already, but what are some of the specific challenges that you're facing these days?
Sure. Well, I'll put them in a couple of categories. And each of these I'll also frame in a more positive sense. But some of the challenges, it can take longer to develop a project in New Hampshire, or at least to develop a project responsibly. There are not the same tools commercially in New Hampshire that are historically what many of the financing parties that fund these projects are accustomed to seeing. Those are two of the things that we've seen. And for context, I'm coming at this from the perspective of a developer working on larger projects. So if there are challenges associated with more traditional distributed generation, those would be ones that I'm not touching on as directly here. On the siting side, it can take a bit longer, but frankly, it's about communicating with the local community, getting input from local stakeholders, be it neighbors, local environmental organizations that may have information on a site, working with experienced local engineering and environmental consulting firms that will have direct knowledge and experience implementing the ways that things can be done responsibly in New Hampshire. And it's frankly enjoyable to do a lot of those things. It's been a bit more of a challenge over the last year or so, some of those activities, and we've had to find new ways to do some of them in the context of COVID. On the commercial side, you can almost think of some of these renewable energy projects as that it's about creating stability, that the price of the renewable energy has been driven down and down and down by competition from many developers pursuing projects and offering those into RFPs or to buyers through other tools. But many of the financing parties for this, what they're accustomed to seeing is a 20-year contract with a utility, and that's often through an RFP process to ensure that the price is the lowest available for the ratepayers. And that's not, I'd say, available on a consistent schedule within New Hampshire, but there are other approaches to the sale of power and the financing of these projects, and that's part of where Olivewood came from. Part of our creation was to approach solar while using a lot of the market-based tools that have historically been used for some other technologies.
Great, thanks. And one last question. We're hearing a lot about net metering these days. Are there any other options for customers, large or small, to procure their electricity from a renewable generator like yourself?
Sure. Well, there are a variety of options. There can be options within a utility for particular tariffs. Outside, there would be competitive suppliers will have opportunities for families, residential customers, governments, educational institutions, businesses to contract for renewable energy. There are also opportunities for individuals to support renewable energy and clean the grid by contracting for just the renewable attributes. I know that may sound a bit abstract of what is a renewable energy credit that folks will often talk about. That's another opportunity, and there is a lot of information out there and different characteristics people think about, like where is the renewable energy coming from? Is my buying renewable energy leading to new projects being built, or am I supporting existing projects? So there are a lot of considerations, there's a lot of information, but it can all get boiled down to a few simple things, and there are a lot of different parties out there offering them.
Great, thank you. Madeleine, what are some of the trends you're seeing in clean energy development in New Hampshire these days?
Yeah, we're definitely seeing the most interest and action, I'd say, in solar development. And that's a little bit bifurcated. We're certainly seeing continued installation on residential size systems, some small C&I systems, like some municipalities putting in systems, mostly because of the way our net metering credit is structured. There's a different credit level for 100 kW capacity and less. So certainly we're seeing a lot of interest and I think continued development in those size systems. And then we are seeing quite a bit of interest and at least momentum, I'd say, on utility scale solar. And that's for a few different reasons. As Mike explained, there's economies of scale when you start to get at bigger projects. And some of the neighboring states in New England have had these clean energy procurements, which are these contracts. There's competitive RFP, and then developers can get a contract with the utilities down there. And so, however, the projects don't necessarily have to be located in the state that's doing the procurement. So here in New Hampshire, we are seeing some of the projects that are winning bids in southern New England states, clean energy procurements being cited up here. So for example, right now, the largest solar array in the state is at Fidelity Investments in Merrimack. They're using all of the electricity generated from their array that's a little over 3 megawatts in capacity in real time, because they have a very large facility that runs 24/7 with lots of data and call centers. So they have plenty of load to just use whatever's generated as it's generated. But we just had a project in Fitzwilliam approved that's going to be 30 megawatts. And that is, jumping very much up to that utility scale. And it is because of these contracts from procurements. Siting is a challenge, certainly for any developments. We have had a hard time developing onshore wind, typical wind in New Hampshire. Antrim wind was just built finally last year after having a challenge with permitting. And already they're running into some issues with some complaints from abutting properties. So certainly I think it's very challenging to develop wind here in New Hampshire for a variety of reasons. So we don't see a ton of interest, though there's a little bit. There's lots of interest and opportunity for offshore wind. So we're very excited about that, but we are also realistic that that's not imminent. We're not going to see turbines off the coast of New Hampshire or in the Gulf of Maine in the next few years. It's going to take a while to get there, but certainly tremendous potential and lots of interest there. We're continuing to see, our fleet of smaller hydropower projects are pretty much stable. A lot of them were built many decades ago, so they are faced with either significant maintenance costs. A lot of them are also going through federal FERC relicensing, which can be quite a process, very costly, takes many years. And sometimes in order to relicense, you have to agree to new conditions that may affect generation or may affect the economic viability of the projects. So that's something to consider. Biomass electric generation has been an ongoing sort of saga here in New Hampshire. We have 6 smaller plants around the 20 to 25 megawatt capacity, and then 2 larger plants around 80 megawatts each. A lot of the smaller plants had closed down, but were recently bought by a new company. And so there's some interest there in seeing if this new owner can get these plants up and running again. The biomass industry is very important to our forest products industry here in New Hampshire. So that's about what we're seeing across the range of renewable technologies.
Thanks. I'm going to go off script here and ask you a question that I've seen recently. I do a lot of work for tax credit investors and for facilities in the upper Midwest and Southeast where there's kind of a longer history of utility scale solar. And in connection with negotiating pilot agreements with municipalities, it seems as though in those states there's a set market and people are, I'll put it this way, when the town forefathers and foremothers are asked to enter into a pilot, there's less uneasiness about figuring out the value of something. Do you see that as a problem in your day-to-day? And is there any way that Clean Energy New Hampshire can play a part in that by kind of formulating something that towns can look to for guidance?
Yeah, absolutely. We are in a unique position because we have business members that are clean energy developers as our business members, but we also work with a lot of towns. We actually have municipal members and we work with energy committees really closely. And so in certain situations, we will have very close working relationship with both the town and the developer, and we try our best to best serve both of them and help, as Mike was saying, some of that relationship building and making sure that projects get done in the best interest and has a positive outcome for the community. Negotiating pilots is something that we get a lot of questions about from towns. How should they value these properties? There's been some controversy certainly about certain utility assessors that may, in the view of developers, overvalue some installations and make promises to the town about how much tax revenue they might be able to get. So it's something that we've certainly looked at. I want to be a little bit careful though, because renewable energy developers hard fought to have the ability to negotiate pilots. And if we have a set formula, it sort of takes away the benefit of negotiating a pilot, which is that flexibility, right? So if you have just a sort of set formula, then it's just a straight tax. Whereas a pilot, which is a payment in lieu of taxes, gives both the developer and the town the flexibility to negotiate something that works best for both of them. And so we don't want to be overly prescriptive. So for example, in some cases where the town and the developer may be building the facility to have a power purchase agreement with the town, if there's a set tax that the town has to assess on the project, they're essentially taxing themselves. So in that case, they may not want to tax the project at all because they would just be taxing themselves. So we want to be helpful and provide resources, but at the same time, respect that one of the goals of being able to negotiate a pilot is to have that flexibility.
Yeah, I think, thanks for the thoughtful answer. Mike?
Yeah, I guess I would add to what Madeleine was saying and agree with much of that, not all of it. I think that the ability of towns to negotiate a pilot and that flexibility is important because there can be significant differences between types of projects as well as differences in value based on time. So a project that has received a contract to sell power a certain number of years ago may get a dramatically higher rate than a project that's in the market now. And if those two projects are viewed the same, that's not consistent with the value of the projects from just kind of the first principles of assessment. And the reality is it's unlikely that a town would actually have a project developed there. And the pilots can provide really benefits to both parties in terms of these are projects that are going to sell power over the long term at likely a fixed price. So they are not going to have significant fluctuation in value for a period of time, but they also really value uncertainty around their costs. For the towns, they avoid any disagreements about value in the future. And we've seen in some towns, such as in Bow, that can be a pretty material risk and cost for that town. So the ability to have long-term certainty regarding revenue to the town is really good for both of the parties, and the flexibility to negotiate a pilot that's really appropriate for the timing of a project is something that is important for there really being projects that come to fruition.
Good. Thank you, Mike. Madeleine, one quick follow-up was, I know you're doing lots of work besides renewable energy generation. Can you give us some examples of that that'll create opportunities in New Hampshire in the future?
Sure. A lot of our work at the Public Utilities Commission right now in dockets are focused on both on developing specific charging tariffs for electric vehicles. So especially on the residential side, that includes time of use rates. As we do more electrification, be it electric vehicles or heating and cooling with efficient heat pumps, for example, these time of use rates are really important to really give price signals and encourage customer behavior to shift some of that increased electricity usage to off-peak times. And so we really want to make it clear to customers that may buy an electric vehicle that they really have an incentive to charge at nighttime, for example, if it's at all possible. So that's what the time of use rates is aiming to do. We're also talking with utilities about make-ready programs, which would be investments that they would make in the grid to be able to host electric vehicle charging infrastructure. That's particularly important for DC fast charging corridors. So these are very high draw chargers, typically are right off of interstates, so that if you are traveling a long distance, you could stop for 10-15 minutes and top off your battery. But those installations can be very costly. We're also working on demand charge alternatives for electric vehicle charging. So as we start to see increased usage of EV chargers, this may not be as critical, but at low usage that we're seeing now, a demand charge can set your cost extremely high, especially for those high draw chargers. And that makes it so that it can be prohibitively expensive to try to build out this infrastructure. So we're in negotiations on all of that. We're also talking quite a bit more about energy storage. More and more there's interest in adding either standalone energy storage or energy storage paired with renewable generation, as well as on all scales, from a Tesla Powerwall in someone's home to very large installations that would be doing arbitrage, charging when prices are low, discharging when prices are high. So we're talking about all of that and trying to get ready. I think both the electrification of transportation and energy storage are two things that there's certainly a lot of opportunity on, and that we're working quite a bit on to try to make New Hampshire policies and utility tariffs all ready for.
Great, thank you. I know battery storage is a great topic. I want to open it up to Ben or Mike if they have any thoughts on that and how New Hampshire plays a part. I know there's some projects in New Hampshire already, but anything you see in the future there for opportunities?
Yeah, I can go first, Mike. Going back to Madeleine's point about the EV infrastructure and the beneficial electrification that can happen, right? So electrification is great for all customers, because when you add load onto the system, you distribute the cost of the system across a broader range of kilowatts, right? So you have more to distribute the cost over, so that can help with the cost control. So we see that as an important part of the cost effectiveness of the solutions that come forward. But as that happens, right, as load goes up on systems, the design of the systems may or may not be ready to accommodate that. So when we think about the upgrades that are necessary in the system, one of the things that storage helps us look at is a different set of solutions than was there before. And we're actively developing really, I think, amazing tools to help us when those situations arise, where we're looking at the forecast of load growth and EV growth on a circuit, that we don't have to think about the same old solutions that we've done for 100 years. Can we bring in storage to either increase hosting capacity in some cases or reduce the demand charge, right? So is there a holistic look at what are the overall vantage points are that makes value for customers, and thinking about what storage can do to fit into those solutions. And we see that storage is a great opportunity to augment the distribution grid and what we call non-wires alternative solutions. And so that's really where I see the utilities role of space in that. And then going beyond that, obviously, it is helpful on the grid when you can pair solar plus storage to help smooth out some of that profile, because on cloudy days or even or sunny days where the system can be hammered, and we'll see relay switching lots and lots with these situations, and so that reduces the lifetime of those components. So storage can help extend the life of some components out there on the distribution system, which helps with reliability. And I'll pass the mic for extra on that.
Thanks, Ben. Well, I think there's a lot to be excited about and optimistic about relating to storage. We see storage as part of a portfolio of tools and sources for both getting the benefits that Ben just described, as well as relating to things like the demand charges and the needs for supporting electrification of additional loads and increased transportation. The costs have been coming down dramatically in storage, and the capabilities have been increasing as well. The costs are down 80 to 90% over less than the last decade, and there's significant reason to expect further reductions in those costs. And there are a lot of opportunities for New Hampshire and for other places to integrate storage, and that can be done a few different ways. One way that we are seeing is storage integrated in, call it standalone, but on the distribution system or in homes. Another way is integrating it with projects. It can be that the storage is co-located with a wind, solar, or other facility, and we're seeing more of that. as well as just larger standalone projects. The integrating with a solar or other renewable source, that's often done as part of a long-term contract again. And it may be that storage is shifting some of the power from when it may be produced, say from solar, from the middle of the day to an evening peak. New Hampshire's peak is in the summer, and then it's high in the middle of the day, but gets a bit higher when folks get home. So storage can be a useful tool for that. Storage can be a useful tool for existing or new wind projects in terms of shifting their production from some of it being in the evening to, again, the shoulder periods. And then the contract structure of the PPA can be a way to get that storage at a lower cost, because there will be certain fixed costs shared by both the storage element and the generation element, and certain efficiencies gained by doing it at the same time. Although there are going to also be opportunities to include storage in projects at a later date, depending upon, of course, subsequent approvals. So we're very excited about it, and as a company, I'm working in energy arbitrage through load shifting back in the early 2000s and have a patent on that. So very excited about it, and it's great to see how the technology is really improving to safely meet a lot of the needs. And really, frankly, changing the whole dynamic of the electric grid, where historically utilities have had this incredible challenge of balancing instantaneously supply and demand. And that really has been a great challenge, and it's amazing to see the systems that have been developed to do that and what people do to make it happen. And now to see the potential of storage to shift that a bit and give utilities and others more of an ability to balance supply and demand in ways that can help with costs, but also have environmental benefits by reducing the need for certain higher polluting resources.
Yeah, I think just one more thing to add on there. So when we think storage, I think for me, for the longest time, what came to mind was the lithium ion kind of container model of storage. And that's great when you think about 3 to 4 hours. But what I'm really excited about is what's happening on the longer duration side, where you're seeing what I would say emerging technology, but a lot of it's proven technology is being reorganized together that's going to allow longer duration storage. And when I say longer duration, what that means to me is the ability to potentially make renewables base load. So how much storage do you need to do that, and over what periods of time? So either seasonal storage or 10-hour discharge windows so that you can discharge over the night when obviously the sun's out, or there's lots of different options out there that are emerging that maybe on the 1 hour, 2 hour window don't compete with the lithium ion solutions, but on a 10-hour window where you need that, it's there. And what we're continuing to see is that with storage, and when we think about resiliency applications and other applications on the grid, it's all about location, location, and location. So so having a wider portfolio of technologies and solutions available to the grid are going to create opportunities for more and more things. And then the work that Mike's doing out there to bring down prices on energy coming from solar, from larger scale solar, is making those other solutions more cost effective sooner than they would have been in the past. And then if you think about the offshore wind, bringing those things together is going to be a great combo.
Great, thank you. So we're 40 minutes in. I want to remind the folks listening in at home and watching at home that you have the opportunity to ask questions to these panel members by just jotting your questions down in the chat box. We have a couple so far. I'll read them off before the end of the hour. So please do contribute if you can. A couple questions for all of the panel. I know we've talked about opportunities and challenges, but in your mind, what is the biggest opportunity to get these projects built in the near term? And can that be done without changes to legislation, or what is the biggest opportunity with and without new legislation, I guess is the question. And maybe Madeleine can start off.
My initial reaction of, can this be done? Can we have a big boom in renewable energy without change in legislation? Probably not. When we look at what just happened and is happening in Maine next door, when I talk to our business members that are developers, they're all really focused on Maine right now because they had a big sudden change in policy after a change in administration that went from having policies that were really not friendly to renewable energy to having policies that were very friendly to renewable energy. That included, a huge ramp up in renewable portfolio standard goals. When we look at our RPS standard goals, it's to have 25% renewable energy by 2025 and then a plateau. All the other New England states are going 80%, 100% over longer periods of time. But certainly as a state, I think if we want to experience a renewable energy boom and attract a lot of investment and employment, there probably does need to be a change in policy. However, this is New Hampshire, and I don't expect us to do things the way Massachusetts has done or the way other states have done it. So I do think that we need to look at a really sort of New Hampshire way of doing things. We don't generally, we're thrifty. We don't have a lot of money to just, throw money at an issue. So we have to be pretty creative. I do think that we are, however, a pretty business-friendly place. And so we need to remember that. And I think if we want to be really attractive to renewable energy businesses, we need to put some effort into that. The biggest opportunity, I don't know, it's hard. I think there's a lot of opportunity in a lot of places. And I think especially sort of a lot of the homegrown businesses here are pretty scrappy and have figured out a way to make their businesses work in New Hampshire. So there's certainly a lot of interest. When we look, even without the policies, when we look, for example, at EV adoption, we're the only state in New England that doesn't have a zero emission vehicle mandate, but we are not last in New England when it comes to electric vehicle adoption. Folks are still interested in that technology. They're still investing, those that can, in adopting that. And so I think we need to figure out what the most effective policy levers will be and what's right for New Hampshire and how are we going to get it done. But I do think that some changes will be necessary if we want to get serious about attracting those investments and employers.
I'm happy to
Go for it, Mike.
So we see significant opportunities without or with legislative changes, but I would say that the scale can increase and the pace can increase with some changes. The resources are there. There are good partners to work with in the state. Absent some of the commercial structures that we've seen elsewhere, it can take more time and there's likely to be less clean energy than there would otherwise be. There's very much an opportunity for a New Hampshire way to do a long-term offtake and to determine what is the amount and timing and criteria that provide the most benefits to ratepayers and absolute benefits to ratepayers compared to other forms of procurement. And it also has the potential, like saying that New Hampshire way to be done efficiently. Many other states have done it. That's great. And see what works. Take the elements that are a good fit for New Hampshire, leave off what's not. I would say Maine is an interesting example because of two things. One, the low costs for energy that they received in their 2020 RFP. And second, that it's a demonstration that a state can do something in a different way from everybody else. So the winning proposals in the 2020 RFP that were approved in September, they had an average cost of, I think, a bit under or around $35 a megawatt hour. So they had escalation, but even with escalation, the prices that were offered in that main RFP would be less than the residential energy cost in New Hampshire at this time. So there's an opportunity on the cost side. But what's interesting from doing things a state's own way, Maine said that they were doing it differently than the other New England states. Instead of seeking a contract for the energy and the renewable attributes, Maine said, you can pick which products you want to offer to us, and we'll see which ones make economic sense to us. And I believe it was something like 14 out of the 15 awarded projects offered energy only, because it was pretty clear that that was at that time, would most likely be the best economic choice for the state. At least in our view, we had a couple of those projects that were selected. So there's an ability to change within bounds a contract structure to really fit what's going to get the most benefits to the ratepayers. And then it's just a balancing act of how does that change? Is that something that someone can still take to a bank or another financing party and they're going to fund the project? If we can hit that threshold, we can still do lots of creative things. Now, in terms of without legislation, there's still going to be renewable energy development, and I think that there's still opportunities for improving the amount and speed of that even without legislation. It's just consistent, clear implementation of permitting standards in ways that enable communities and other stakeholders to be involved in the process and provide feedback, as well as clarity for developers about what that process is going to be. That really goes a long way to making sure that a project is developed in a way that's a fit for a community and provides benefits and attracts economic activity. And then the one thing I'd add on to this is that it's not just about economic growth related to clean energy. There are many other businesses that want to locate themselves where there is clean energy available. We're seeing this as a big trend with technology companies, be it a data center or another form of technology company, where frankly many of them see it as almost just a necessity for locating their projects, that they have an ability to get clean energy for it. And the standards for that clean energy are going up and up, so that many of them really want to have that clean energy be physically in the state or on the grid that they are on, rather than just saying, well, you know what, I'm in New Hampshire, but I'll buy a REC from a Texas wind project. That's not going to cut it for a lot of these customers. And so clean energy can really be a tool for helping to bring in other economic development as well.
Yeah, it's a fascinating point, especially when folks are trying to lure the Amazons of the world to their neck of the woods to see if they'll throw that in as a part of a package, So thanks for that thoughtful insight. We have about 12 minutes left. I wanted to hit this question, then we'll jump into the other questions we have from the viewers. Whether or not, whatever the state does, if anything, the Biden administration infrastructure plan proposes a clean energy standard to reach 100% clean energy by 2035. Do you think this is realistic and affordable for customers? And would it cause reliability issues? I guess I'll ask Ben that one first.
Yeah, there's legitimate challenges to try to make that happen, I think, across the board, right? And I think we're up for those challenges, and we're excited about those challenges and the opportunities they're going to present. It will not be something that Eversource does. It won't be something that Mike does. It will be something that we're going to have to work on together in collaboration on. And through the regulatory process, there's a lot of opportunity for stakeholder engagement in that. And so those challenges are really going to require a lot of us working together on that. It's going to take a lot of solutions as well, right? So transportation is the biggest single opportunity for decarbonization along the pipelines. And so we're doing a lot of work in that space right now. There's still a lot of opportunity for energy efficiency, right? And so energy efficiency is a tremendous resource to help reduce that overall system demand. And then when we think about the storage we talked about earlier as a means to shift some of that demand and to augment some of that demand, and then to help with cost controls. Obviously, the technology piece continues to be important, but then responsible planning and coordination has to be there. But that has to happen in a timely manner that's effective for the developers of the world to be able to bring those solutions to customers the way they want them to do. And so all of those across the board have to continue to improve constantly and continuously to reach us at a point where we have the capacity. There's I think what might be the alluring thing is to think about some of the low-hanging fruit and some of those easier things. So getting early wins and getting a lot of momentum early is going to be possible. But I'm really, personally excited about that challenge on that last little bit and squeezing that out. So thinking about how the customers use energy, thinking about how they go about their business. How do our commercial industrial customers use steam? How are they doing green steam? How are we helping to support those initiatives? The other piece in there is thinking about how are we going to continue to use technology to help make that happen, and what investments are missing that are beneficial to all customers that utility has the right space to support. And I think those conversations are going to continue to evolve over the coming years, but they have to continue to move at a pace. And those conversations need to continue to happen, and we're there for that. We're supportive of that. We're actively working with stakeholders across the board in regulatory and legal proceedings to help move some of these things forward, and we're really, really excited about that opportunity.
Speaking it not as a renewable energy attorney, but as just a homeowner in the state of New Hampshire, who, like many others, feels like they get crushed with property taxes, the idea of having my electricity rates also go up without any, it's just hard. And I think that's the messaging that I think globally has to be transmitted. Whereas if you introduce these projects into your towns and get the commercial tax revenue from them, you would have potentially some sort of cost saving on your property taxes. I guess that messaging, though, is sophisticated and hard to spread. I'm not sure if, Madeleine, you have any thoughts on that, or if there's any efforts to...
Yeah, I mean, as far as the clean electricity standard by 2035, I think it's bold and it's ambitious, but I think it is totally doable. It will take an all hands on deck and innovation, but if there's a commitment to it and there's a clear direction and a commitment that that's what we're doing, I have, total confidence that we can get there and that it can be done in an affordable way. But as you're talking, it will take those towns that are, welcoming new developments with open arms. And it can be because it will create significant tax revenue for their town, be it because they need, here in New Hampshire, they need better funding for their schools, or they want to be able to provide some property tax relief for their residents. There are a lot of benefits to hosting renewable energy developments, but siting is hard for all types of energy infrastructure, not just renewable energy. But if we are going to make this transition, it's going to take a lot of new development. And it's not just generation, it's going to take new transmission infrastructure or upgraded transmission infrastructure. And so we are going to have to be welcoming to all of that. And we are going to have to be realistic about the fact that we can't do this transition and build out all this new generation without cutting a single tree, right? Like, there is going to be development and we're going to have to embrace it. So that's going to be a reality. We're working really closely right now with the Department of Environmental Services that's going into a rulemaking imminently on how to permit stormwater for large solar development. And so that's a big issue for us. It's a big issue for our members. We want to make sure that these developments are treated fairly, right? Like, a solar panel field is not the same as a parking lot, and we want that to be, respected. And so we want to make sure that the standards, that the development is done responsibly, but that the standards are realistic at the same time.
Right.
Well, I guess to amplify a few of the things that each of Madeleine and Ben have said, that it tends to be that you need to have goals to get things done, and then there are a lot of different tools for meeting those goals. And I think that the scale of the challenge is significant, that it's going to require collaboration as well as competition to achieve it, but that it's going to evolve through a portfolio of different solutions. So when we look at the standards, frankly, and expectations for everyone are going to increase as we go along. And that's the pattern that we've seen as we've become, it tends to get harder as we go up the curve on some things, where integrating the first amount of clean energy is easiest and has the least complexity, because there's the most, say, room on the grid or ability to absorb a variable input. But by having more and more of the clean energy come in, it's encouraged more and more investment, more and more competition. We've seen technology improvements so that we can now better manage the incremental amounts of clean energy that have come in. And we have seen improvements in storage. And it's going to require, and competition has been a big part of that. Collaboration has been an important part as well, as Ben said. The developers working with utilities, all parties working with communities and stakeholders. We've actually had a good experience working with Eversource on interconnection studies, and have found that they've been, say rather forward-looking in much of the analysis and doing analysis in ways to make sure that the grid, be it distribution or transmission level, can support the incremental energy and kind of looking around the corner a bit. And we do see opportunities to kind of improve certain things, but we hope to continue to work through items with them and with others. So I think the only thing we know is that it's going to take many different solutions, and that whatever we think the one solution is now is likely going to evolve a bit over this timeline. But that it's important to have the ambitious goal, because we're not going to hit it if we don't have it.
Right. Thank you, Mike. We only have 3 minutes left, and we fielded a question about the panel's thoughts on FERC Order 2222. I'm not sure if we have enough time to talk about that. I'm not really sure whom, maybe Madeleine wants to give a, or maybe Ben does.
Yeah, it's an important piece of change in the way that FERC thinks about distributed energy resources, right? New England ISO had already allowed some distributed energy resources to bid into the capacity auction, but this is a really significant expansion, not just in New England, but across the country, for giving access to distributed energy resources participating in the wholesale market, right? So allowing aggregations of different mixtures of resources to work together to offer into the markets as a aggregation is a big difference. And in that, there can be significant changes to what happens to the markets over time. If you start to see, this is combining home thermostats with somebody else's Tesla Powerwall with somebody else's solar facility, and aggregating those together and participating in all of the wholesale markets. And then that's going to be the type of market competition that's necessary to bring the real market value of some of these resources to bear. And so specifically in New Hampshire, where we're looking at cost effectiveness and trying to avoid moving cost across to all customers that aren't necessarily immediately benefiting, those market reforms are going to be really important to getting value to the customers who are participating in those aggregations and offer new opportunities for development, I believe, coming forward. I'll pass to Madeleine for follow-up on that.
Yeah, I'd say we had a really innovative move by Sunrun here in New Hampshire and ISO New England to do a little bit what Ben was talking about, aggregate residential solar paired with storage and bid it into the wholesale and capacity market. And what FERC Order 2222 is trying to do is to make that an option available to everyone, right? Take that innovative approach and make it easier for developers to do that. When we were talking about, making a real transition, and we're going to need competition, we're going to need innovation, it's certainly welcome to have more options to aggregate resources and get compensation and have access to markets.
I think the FERC's going to be something to watch too in the coming months as well, as there's been a lot of talk about prioritizing the policy objectives of different states, and our region specifically has been very vocal as a general region about some of the policy constraints at the FERC level. So there's a lot to be coming there that I think that bears watching in the coming months that could have significant ramifications about how all these resources will play in the macro scale in the region.
Great. Well, thank you. I see Andrew popped up. Believe it or not, it's 11 o'clock. I just want to personally thank Ben, Madeleine, and Mike for enlightening us with all of their thoughts. It's not often we get this opportunity. I want to thank the registrants for joining in and supporting New Hampshire Energy Week and Clean Energy New Hampshire. If you haven't already joined Clean Energy New Hampshire, please do so right now. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Andrew.
Wonderful. Thank you all. Make sure you check out nhenergyfuture.org for any other events coming up this week. And thank you all to our panelists, and special thanks to Mark and Brianna working the back end. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.